Welcome to this quiet corner of curiosity, where thoughts drift like clouds across the night sky, and wonder is allowed its full measure of time. Tonight, rather than racing through ideas the way the daylight hours so often demand, we are going to sink into them, slowly, as if each question were a smooth stone, dropped one by one into a still pond. This evening, we step away from the ordinary paths. We won't be counting sheep, or scrolling headlines, or chasing the day's news. Instead, we will trace an older, deeper question, a question that may feel at once audacious and humbling, like standing on the edge of a canyon at dusk, sensing how small we really are. The question is this: could there have been, on this ancient earth of ours, a civilization long forgotten, one sophisticated not only in agriculture, or art, or stone and bronze, but in the very sciences we call cutting edge today? Could a culture before us, not whispered myths or legends, but a tangible society, have mastered knowledge of the quantum, the invisible dance of particles and probabilities, the reality beneath reality? Perhaps the idea feels unlikely. Perhaps it feels absurd. But then again, so too would the notion of today's physics feel absurd to someone centuries ago. Imagine explaining to a farmer of the Middle Ages that empty space is alive with quantum fields, or that two particles can mirror each other's fate across impossible distances. They might laugh, or fall silent, or think you were telling a riddle meant for dreams. And so tonight, we allow ourselves, gently, slowly, to consider, what if? What if civilizations rise not only to build pyramids and paint in ochre, but sometimes to glimpse truths so strange that even we, with our accelerators and lasers, are only barely beginning to rediscover them? You don't need to solve the mystery. You don't even need to stay awake for it. Let it simply unfold. Settle in, if you haven't already. Lie back, adjust the blanket over your shoulders, and let your breaths lengthen. This is not a race, not a lecture. It's a drifting journey through science, speculation, and story. And somewhere in the quiet space between thought and sleep, maybe, just maybe, you'll catch the whisper of the question again. Could a lost civilization have mastered quantum physics? Before we can even begin to imagine civilizations lost to history, let's first find ourselves in the immense stillness of time itself. If you are lying back now, let your body soften as though your weight was sinking into the surface of the earth, becoming part of it. Feel the quiet gravity holding you. That same invisible embrace has held forests, oceans, mountains, and entire forgotten landscapes. Long before our cities were here, long before words were whispered into air, the planet turned just as it does tonight. Civilizations, after all, are brief guests in this long home. Our society is measured in centuries, perhaps millennia if we are generous, while the continents themselves drift like unhurried rafts across an ocean of millions of years. Compared to mountains, cultures are like small clouds that pass after a single afternoon. Compared to rivers, we are the splash of rain returning quickly to the sea. Imagine, for a moment, Earth's history as a vast calendar, 365 days to encompass 4.5 billion years. On this scale, the dinosaurs stride in around Christmas Eve, and vanish in a sudden storm of fire on December 26th. The first humans don't appear until late evening, December 31st, barely minutes before midnight. And modern civilization with its lights, satellites, and quantum equations? In that calendar, it is no more than a single breath, drawn and exhaled just before the clock strikes 12. This is the scale on which we live. A scale so wide our stories barely ripple it. And yet, within these fleeting moments, humans seek permanence. We shape stone, paint walls, write books, transmit signals into the night sky. We try to anchor ourselves against the tide of forgetting. But the earth is patient. She folds mountains back into the sea. She hides roads beneath forests. She weaves ruins into roots and rivers. We are remembered only for as long as the planet allows. So, when we ask whether a civilization could have existed before us, whether they might have seen further into reality than we think possible, we are asking a question not about imagination, but about time. Time so deep that entire histories might be folded, erased, and crumbled into silence. If the surface of the Earth is like a chalkboard, then plate tectonics, weather, and oceans are erasers that never set down. Every few moments in geological time, they sweep across the board, clearing all but the faintest traces of chalk at the edges. A few fossils, a few ruins, a few mysteries survive. Everything else becomes soil, stone, and silence. So tonight, as you drift, imagine you are resting not only in your bed, but atop layers of countless forgotten stories. Beneath your city, beneath the forests and deserts and seas, lie echoes of all that has come before. Not all of them human, but perhaps some of them more familiar than we dare admit. And with that gentle thought, our journey truly begins. To understand whether a lost civilization might be hiding in Earth's past, we first have to embrace the true scale of that past. Not thousands of years, not even millions, but billions. A scale so wide that human imagination, designed to count heartbeats and seasons, begins to falter. Imagine the Earth as an ancient book, not a slim volume of stories, but a sweeping library, its shelves higher than mountains and its pages deeper than oceans. This book carries 4.5 billion pages, each one thick with 100,000 years of detail. On most pages, there are no humans at all, only oceans swelling, continents colliding, volcanoes whispering their heat into the air. Humanity, all of our myths and memories, occupy only the very last page, a few words scrawled at the end, as if we arrived in the library only as it was closing its doors. Even the very notion of ancient history is tiny in this scale. The pyramids, the hanging gardens, the wisdom of Babylon, the golden age of Athens, all of it is but a thin pencil mark in the corner of the last page. Civilizations rise, empires collapse, but in geological time they pass faster than fireflies blinking at dusk. And yet, even within such fleeting moments, life transforms itself. The Earth is not static but restless. Continents wander as if sleepwalking. At this very moment, Africa is slowly drifting north, closing the Mediterranean like a book. Australia slides northward toward Asia, inch by inch. Imagine that, continents as rafts, sailing silently, their voyages taking millions of years to reach their next shore. Deep time is an ocean with powerful currents. Mountains wear away grain by grain. Rivers cut valleys until stone itself looks like water rippling in frozen form. Oceans rise and fall not once but many times, swallowing coastlines, devouring plains, then retreating again like tired breath. Imagine how many layers of memory vanish into these tides. A city built too close to the shoreline may, in just a few thousand years, be buried under sand, its stones softened and crumbled by salt, its traces dissolved into a puzzle our own species may never find. Take, for example, the ruins of Alexandria's great library, once home to more scrolls than any other collection on Earth. Even that miracle of knowledge, archived thought shimmering in ink, was reduced to ash, forgotten in less than 2 millennia. If that can happen in mere centuries, what chance does evidence have after millions of years? The Earth does not simply let things rest where they fell. It rolls them back into itself. Fossils are rare precisely because this planet eats its own history with wind, rivers, and time. Scientists have even explored this idea directly in what's called the Silurian hypothesis, a thought experiment proposed by astrophysicist Adam Frank and climate scientist Gavin Schmidt. They asked, could another industrial civilization have existed here millions of years ago? And if it did, how would we know? Their answer was sobering. Geological history erases almost everything. After hundreds of thousands of years, even plastic, steel, concrete, and glass would crumble or be buried. After millions of years, evidence would be microscopic at best. A thin chemical trace in sediments, maybe a subtle fingerprint of altered carbon levels, perhaps nothing more. Consider how humbling this is. The dinosaurs ruled the Earth for over 160 million years, and yet when their world ended, most of it was swallowed whole. All we read now are a few fractured skeletons, a handful of prints pressed in mud that hardened into stone. The largest creatures Earth has ever known could vanish to whispers. And if giants can vanish, could not also the slender traces of minds, tools, even sciences, dissolve too? This is why deep time is both terrifying and soothing. Terrifying, because it renders us fragile. Our skyscrapers and silicon no sturdier than leaves on the wind. Soothing, because it shows us that impermanence is not failure, but the rhythm of this planet. Everything arrives, everything departs. Species, rivers, civilizations, mountains, even continents themselves are transient guests in the long geological concert. So pause here, and let your breathing find the patience of deep time. Inhale the idea that moments are brief. Exhale the awareness that the Earth story is slow, rewriting itself at the pace of tectonic plates, where an inch of movement might be a century's work. This is the ocean of deep time in which our question lives. Could somewhere in those vast pages before us, millions of years before Homo sapiens carved their first tools, another story have hidden? Not a story of myths or gods, but of science. A story of beings who might have glimpsed the patterns beneath matter, who might have whispered about particles moving in fields, long before we gave such things names? Civilizations are waves on this timeless sea. Some crash brightly into cliffs. Some fade quietly upon the sand. Perhaps one wave rose long ago, crested with knowledge extraordinary, and slipped into the depths again, leaving the shoreline empty. And now, in the hush of night, we find ourselves floating on that possibility. When we speak of civilizations mastering quantum physics, what do we even mean? To answer that, let's pause and introduce the phenomenon itself, the strange ocean beneath the visible world. Not to memorize equations or wrestle concepts into sharp outlines. Instead, simply to drift upon them, as if they were starlight reflected in a quiet pool. At first glance, quantum physics seems less like science and more like poetry told in whispers. It claims that the world, beneath the texture of wood or stone or skin, is not simply solid but shimmering with possibility. That particles, the tiny building blocks of all matter, do not follow firm paths like marbles rolling along grooves, but instead exist in a haze of probabilities. Imagine you are dreaming. In the dream, you find a door. Perhaps in one part of the dream, you open the door and a meadow waits. In another layer of the dream, you open it into a library. In another, into darkness. In the dream, all these possibilities coexist, blurred together, until you awaken, or until the dream itself chooses a path. This is what physicists call superposition, a particle resting in many possible states at once, like a coin not yet heads or tails, but both, until the world nudges it into choosing. Stranger still is the phenomenon of entanglement. Imagine two dancers who rehearse a secret choreography so perfectly that no matter how far apart they later stand, across a room, a city, or even the span of galaxies, they move in unison. If one lifts her hand, the other does the same, instantly, without communication or delay. Entangled particles behave as though sharing an invisible thread outside space itself. Einstein once called it spooky action at a distance. Spooky indeed, but real. And then there is uncertainty. Not uncertainty in the way we doubt or hesitate, but a built-in property of reality. To know precisely where a particle is, we must loosen our grasp on how fast it is moving. To know precisely how fast it is, we must blur our sense of where. The universe, at its most basic level, seems to be telling us, you cannot hold every truth in your hands at once. Reality resists clarity. It prefers mystery. Even the idea of particles itself is slippery. Sometimes they behave like tiny marbles, sometimes like spread out waves, as if they cannot decide, or perhaps as if the distinction means nothing to them. Matter and light, under the quantum lens, dissolve into dualities. Wave and particle, possibility and actuality, hidden and revealed. For those first encountering these ideas, even today, it feels unsettling, like standing at the edge of a forest at night, where the shapes of trees seem to shift if you look too long. And yet, for the scientists of the early 20th century who uncovered these truths, Heisenberg, Schrödinger, Dirac, Einstein, quantum theory was not superstition. It was mathematics that mapped precisely onto experiments, over and over, until disbelief had no footing. Let your thoughts settle softly here. Quantum physics is not only about equations scrawled on chalkboards or colliders smashing particles into sparks. At heart, it is a language to describe uncertainty, possibility, connection, and transformation. Concepts that sound strangely like those we find in art, in dreams, even in philosophy. Now, imagine for a moment, if these phenomena are woven into the universe itself, is it truly unthinkable that others, before us, might have glimpsed them? Perhaps not with particle detectors and supercomputers, but with other forms of insight, mathematical intuitions, or experimental curiosities now long erased. Civilization does not need to be industrial to leave traces of thought. It needs only curiosity, carried far enough that it illuminates the invisible. Think again of entanglement, distant things moving together. Now think of civilizations separated not by space, but by time. Could humanity today and a lost society millions of years ago be separated, yet, for a glimmering instant, thinking the same thought about existence? The image is almost like a cosmic entanglement through history, ideas linked across the abyss. And yet, we must admit, even our own age has only begun to apply these discoveries. Quantum mechanics powers the silicon chips inside your phone, the lasers that read banking cards, the sensors guiding satellites in space. But we stand just at the threshold, fumbling with quantum computers, quantum encryption, quantum sensing. Like a child learning to whistle, we only produce our first fragile notes. So what would it mean for a lost civilization to master quantum mechanics? Could they have gone further in ways we can't yet imagine? Could they have encoded knowledge not in stone or ink, but in arrangements so subtle that the earth swallowed them without a trace? Or perhaps left whispers known to us as myths, stories of entities who pass through walls, or voices who know one another's thoughts across distances? Might such myths be shadows of knowledge, translated through time's haze into symbolism? For now, let this not be a demand for answers, but a lullaby of questions. As you breathe slowly, think of particles dancing unseen around you, of the solidity of your pillow and blanket quietly dissolving into vibrating fields of probability. Every material thing, every heartbeat, every second, is steeped in quantum strangeness. And if we can know it, why not others, long before us, who gazed at the world and saw with different eyes? Up until now, we have looked at the scale of time and the subtle, almost dreamlike rules of quantum physics. But here is the question humming quietly like a candle flame in the dark. Could some civilization before us, hidden deep in the folds of time, have known these things? Could they have leaned close to the fabric of existence and whispered truths that we are only now beginning to catch again? The very idea may feel almost impossible. After all, our modern understanding of quantum physics grows out of centuries of carefully layered progress. Mathematics built brick by brick, technology refined across generations. We imagine tall stacks of knowledge rising slowly until, at last, the tower is tall enough to glimpse the strange landscape of the quantum world. How could any earlier society, even one erased by time, possibly climb so high without leaving obvious traces? And yet, history reminds us that lost knowledge is real knowledge too. Civilizations discover, create, and sometimes forget. Like tides coming and going, wisdom can vanish into the ocean of time. Each rediscovery feels like a miracle, though perhaps it is more like memory returning after a long sleep. Take the Babylonians of 3,000 years ago. Recently, clay tablets were studied and revealed astronomical calculations so precise that they mirrored geometrical methods of modern calculus. These ancient scholars were tracking Jupiter's orbit across the heavens using mathematics that Europe would not rediscover for well over 1,000 years. For centuries, that fire of insight burned quietly, mostly unknown, before modern eyes recognized it again. Or consider the Antikythera mechanism, recovered from the depths of the sea more than a century ago. At first, it appeared to be nothing more than a corroded lump of bronze. Yet inside was one of the most astonishing surprises in archaeology, a mechanical computer, built by ancient Greeks 2,000 years past, capable of predicting eclipses, planetary positions, even the cycles of the Olympic Games. The gears so finely cut and interwoven that no equivalent mechanism appeared again until the medieval clockmakers of Europe. It was as if a piece of modern engineering had slipped backwards into time. Here, then, is the reminder: history does not move only forward. It flickers, leaps, forgets, and rediscovers. Insight can flare brightly, then vanish, leaving only cinders, misunderstood or ignored by those who come next. So when we ask if a civilization might have glimpsed quantum truths, perhaps it is not so unthinkable. Not that they built particle accelerators under the ground or laboratories filled with superconductors, but that they touched the essential mystery, that they noticed patterns, correspondences, behaviors that hinted at a reality stranger than surfaces. Even our own ancestors spoke in ways that echo quantum riddles. In Vedic philosophy, for instance, ancient scholars of India described the world not as solid but as made of vibrating energy, prana, woven into different forms. The Taoists of China spoke of the interplay of opposites, the yin and the yang, not as absolutes, but as fluid states, shifting and intertwining, much like the quantum dualities of wave and particle. These are not physics experiments, but they are attempts to describe reality as layered, paradoxical, and unified by invisible laws. Could they be fragments, glimmers of older knowledge recast as philosophy or myth? Let us also remember how fragile material evidence is. Fires, floods, wars, and time itself erase. Think of the Library of Alexandria, shelves filled with scrolls that might have contained entire worlds of scientific thought. When the flames rose, countless years of insight turned into smoke drifting into the Mediterranean night. And that was a loss of just 2,000 years. Imagine, then, what was consumed in 2 million. Here we venture into the realm of speculation, but with gentle humility. Perhaps, somewhere in the forgotten pages of deep time, a culture advanced in ways now invisible once stood. Not a global empire of satellites and skyscrapers, but perhaps a scattered people who perceived truths in nature so subtle we would call them quantum. They may have woven this into rituals, into architecture, into art. They may have built tools not of stone or steel, but patterns carved into fields we have yet to notice. Could a civilization record information not in clay or papyrus, but in the arrangement of atoms, or in waves of sound and light, inscriptions now long gone with the earth-shifting layers? At first, such suggestions feel fantastical. But remember, when quantum mechanics was first proposed only a century ago, even the brightest minds dismissed it as nonsense. It shattered the boundaries of intuition then. Why not now? Think of superposition again, things existing in many possibilities until one is observed. Our history itself has superpositions. Perhaps one branch contains only the familiar story, hunter-gatherers to farmers, farmers to cities, cities to us. But maybe, in other possible branches now erased, there were other starts, other rises, other collapses. The archaeological record shows only one outcome, but there were once, perhaps, many. To consider this is not to insist upon it, but to cradle the possibility in our hands, softly, like something delicate and fragile. Not proof, not certainty, but wonder. As you gently rest, imagine walking the streets of a civilization long gone, not paved with cobbles or asphalt, but with stone resonant like instruments. Imagine scholars not scribbling equations on chalk, but chanting patterns that capture quantum truths in rhythm and sound. Imagine not heavy machines but subtle tools tuned to the invisible properties of matter, tuning forks for atoms, flutes for particles, knowledge that once rang clear but is now silent. It is only a dream. And yet dreams sometimes lean close to truths we are not yet ready to say aloud. And so the question lingers. Could the ancients have known more than we believe? Could they have glimpsed, in their own way, the mysteries that today we call quantum physics? Perhaps. Or perhaps the thought itself exists only to remind us that knowledge flows like tides, coming, retreating, returning again in endless patterns. And in that cycle, it is no longer so hard to believe that maybe, just maybe, we are not the first to peer beneath the surface of reality, and we will not be the last. Speculation gives us wings, but evidence gives us ground. So let us place our feet gently back on the earth for a moment, and ask, if there once was a civilization that understood mysteries as subtle as the quantum world, what traces might we hope to find? The sobering truth is this: the earth is not an archive, but a restless editor. It is not a library that keeps every book. It is a sea that swallows, rewrites, and recycles its stories. What survives is not the full novel of history, but a scattering of pages, sometimes even only a sentence on the wind. Think of fossils. Dinosaurs thundered across our world for 160 million years, yet what remains now is only a fragment, a few bones, a trace of skin imprinted into mud, teeth shining faintly in sediment. For each fossil we find, there may be thousands of creatures erased completely. The Earth buries, compresses, melts, and renews. Even mountains are sandcastles in this scale, dissolving back into grains. So the puzzle becomes, what kinds of evidence are most likely to endure? Archaeologists search for traces in stone, clay, and bone, materials stubborn in the face of time. But a civilization dabbling in physics may have left different signatures, ones not written in sculpture or monuments, but hidden more quietly in chemistry, in isotopes, in residues smeared into the deep layers of soil. This is where the Silurian hypothesis, posed by scientists Adam Frank and Gavin Schmidt, offers us a map of sorts. They ask simply, if there had been an industrial civilization many millions of years ago, what would remain today? Not much, but perhaps a few faint fingerprints. For instance, unusual chemical patterns in ancient rocks, elevated carbon dioxide, traces of plastics, spikes of certain metals, things that do not form naturally in abundance. Imagine a detective searching not for footprints in the flour, but a faint scent carried in the air. Even now, our own age is leaving such markers, plastics drifting through oceans, nitrogen from fertilizers altering soil chemistry, radioactive isotopes from nuclear testing embedded in deep sediments. Millions of years hence, these may compress into thin layers. If another civilization arises after us, they may dig into those strata and wonder, who were the beings who lived here? What did they know? Why did they vanish? So what of a lost civilization before us? Perhaps their remains do lie hidden in stone, but subtle, almost camouflaged. If they used materials more delicate than bronze or iron, say, exotic alloys or arrangements of atoms, their artifacts might weaken and dissolve faster than the limestone around them. If they encoded knowledge in wavelengths of light or fields of magnetism, then time itself may have scattered their libraries back into the silence. Or perhaps they left marks in ways we don't yet know how to read. Imagine trying to explain a digital hard drive to an archaeologist of the 1500s. They could dig it up, turn it over, melt it down, and never know it held oceans of meaning. Could we be just as blind today? Perhaps what we think of as natural anomalies, strange mineral patterns, unexplained magnetic alignments, are really scraps of lost intention. And yet, here is the humbling truth. Even if evidence exists, the odds are stacked against us. Erosion, earthquakes, floods, shifting landmasses. This planet does not leave footprints in sand. It sweeps its beach every night. And so, if there was indeed such a civilization, our evidence may be no more than a chemical ghost in the rocks, or a suspicion in the patterns of geology. This is why scientists maintain caution. Without evidence, the story remains a lullaby of perhaps and maybe. The rigor of science asks us to measure, to weigh, to doubt. But the curiosity of the human spirit allows us to keep asking, what would it look like if it were true? Without that gentle nudge from imagination, we would never discover the unexpected at all. For now, then, the Earth keeps its secrets close. The crust beneath our feet is both historian and censor, preserving fragments and erasing the rest. It does not keep diaries, it keeps palimpsests, pages written over and over again, the old ink faintly shining beneath the new. And so, as you breathe slowly, think of yourself lying not just upon your bed, but upon countless rewritten layers of Earth's long memory. Beneath your city, beneath the ground, lie sediments whispering with chemical signatures, the tiniest hints of vanished oceans, forests, deserts, and perhaps, even if only in possibility, societies before us. The evidence may be lost, or buried, or never to be found. But the method, this patient, tender search for traces, is our way of listening. Listening to a planet that never speaks outright, but lets its whispers echo softly in rock, in soil, in fragments of time itself. Every question worth asking carries its shadows. Wonder points us forward, but doubt steadies our steps. If we are to be fair to this strange idea, that an ancient civilization once mastered the quantum world, we must invite its counterarguments into the room, not as harsh critics, but as careful companions. The first and most obvious challenge is this: the quantum world is not only subtle, it is elusive. To even glimpse its behavior requires a precision that is astonishing. In our own history, it took centuries of mathematics to prepare the ground, from Newton's dream of physics to Maxwell's equations of electromagnetism, each step building a staircase, brick by brick, leading finally to Einstein, Planck, Schrödinger, and Heisenberg. Could a society leap directly to such insights without walking those steps? Perhaps they could have sensed patterns intuitively, but formalizing them requires more than intuition. It requires systematic measurement and a durable base of cumulative knowledge. Second, there is the matter of infrastructure. Modern quantum investigations rely on instruments at the edge of technology, particle accelerators stretching for miles underground, lasers vibrating with unfathomable precision, cryogenic chambers keeping atoms colder than the vacuum of space. These are not tools one stumbles into. They are the fruit of centuries of accumulated industry, global networks of mining, chemistry, electricity, and mathematics. If a civilization millions of years ago had reached such heights, shouldn't there be at least shards of their scaffolding left behind? Rusted alloys not of natural form, mines drilled in curious geometries, radiation residues beyond the patterns of geology? And then there is the silence of human evolution itself. Our species, Homo sapiens, emerged roughly 300,000 years ago. Even pushing further back, earlier hominins held fire, tools, maybe language, but in all the fossil record, we find no hint of a society rivaling the complexity of our present one. If an advanced civilization existed before us, it was not made of humans like us, or at least not made in a way we yet recognize. That silence in the anthropological record carries weight. Another skepticism. Why do myths and traditions, so abundant with cosmic imagination, not tell clearer stories? Ancient myths explain creation, the stars, the cycles of life, but none say with certainty, we unlock the quantum world, and it slipped away. Myths hint at paradoxes and dreamlike realities, certainly, but to skeptics, these are not blueprints of physics, only the symbolic language of cultures interpreting the infinite. So the scientist pauses, shakes their head gently, and says, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Without ruins of observatories beyond known engineering, without artifacts that defy metallurgy, without layered geochemistry proving unusual industry millions of years ago, the hypothesis remains unlikely. Not impossible, but unlikely. And yet, here is the softer reflection. Doubt itself need not destroy wonder. Doubt is another form of love, a desire to keep our stories honest, grounded, tethered to reality's firm soil. It says, dream, yes, but do not dream so loosely that you forget the ground you lie upon. The skeptics remind us that the journey to our present knowledge was not easy. Each equation represents centuries of persistence. Each discovery depends on hundreds of others, like stones laid carefully into a bridge across a wide river. And bridges do not build themselves overnight, nor do they vanish without leaving piers in the water. In this way, the challenge strengthens the imagination. By asking how unlikely, by pointing to the steps needed, it does not close the door, but it gives shape to the room we are exploring. Without boundaries, imagination drifts endlessly. With boundaries, it becomes a lantern shining into the unknown. So tonight, let the counterarguments be a lull on your path rather than a wall. As you breathe softly, think of them like clouds, shades drifting across your sky of thought. They remind you that even dreaming must balance itself with waking, and in that balance, the central question remains: could a lost civilization have mastered what we call quantum physics? Likely not, the voices of reason say. And yet, perhaps it is in the quiet tension between likely not and but maybe that the true wonder lives. So far, we have listened to silence, to possibility, and to doubt. For this chapter, let us invite imagination to walk beside us again, softly, no longer chained to what we know, but free to drift into what we might dream. Tonight, think of these not as answers, but as thought experiments, gentle stories told to the resting mind, ideas as soft lanterns, carried into sleep. The city of resonance. First, imagine a city, not made of glass and steel, but of stone tuned like instruments. Each column, each wall is cut precisely, not for decoration, but for sound. When wind passes, the entire city hums with subtle tones. Scholars in long-forgotten robes wander its quiet streets, listening, not with ears only, but with devices that let them hear deeper, into the vibrations of atoms themselves. Here, in this imagined place, quantum truth is not derived with equations written on chalkboards. It is sung, resonated, felt in the air as harmonies. Perhaps their knowledge was not numbers but music. And when their city fell, whether to fire, or flood, or merely time, their symphonies collapsed into dust, leaving only faint rumors of stone cut strangely for the wind. The library of atoms. Imagine next, a culture whose libraries are not scrolls or computers but matter itself. Instead of ink, they encode information by arranging atoms into patterns, building crystalline forms that hold vast archives. To them, knowledge is stored within minerals and stones, invisible to the naked eye, but readable with instruments far too delicate for the archaeologist's trowel today. As time passes, as heat and pressure fold the earth anew, these crystalline memories dissolve back into raw minerals. What survives to us is perhaps seen only as unusual quartz, or strange alignments in obsidian, discarded as natural anomalies. Their library could be beneath your feet right now, an unreadable puzzle locked inside the common stones of the earth. The quantum garden. Now picture a people who bend biology itself into their research. They cultivate gardens where plants are not just food or ornament, but experiments in physics. Their blossoms open and close in patterns guided by quantum coherence, quantum photosynthesis. Their trees are living laboratories tuned to subtle forces. In this world, science is not steel and circuits. It is petals, vines, crystalline seeds whispered into soil. When this society fades, what is left? Fossilized pollen, indistinguishable from ordinary dust. Root impressions in old rock. The final traces of an immense botanical laboratory erased into the silence of time. The civilization of silence. Or consider another thought, a civilization so deeply immersed in quantum mastery that it turns invisible, not cloaked intentionally, but naturally erased by its very success. Perhaps they discover how to build with patterns of probability, weaving structures that collapse back into nothingness once unmeasured. Their cities vanish as soon as they are abandoned, reverting into the fabric of space itself. What archaeologist could find such remains? What geologist could sample buildings that leave no debris? The only evidence that they were ever there might be faint distortions in background radiation, or an unexplained harmony in the universal constants. To us, they are nothing more than shadows. And shadows, by their nature, cannot be held. The mirror of the present. Now imagine, not the past, but the reflection of our own present, seen through deep time as if the earth herself keeps no loyalty to one story over another. Could it be that our own modern civilization, with its shimmering circuits, lasers, and equations, is just another fleeting wave, soon to break, soon to fall back into sand? Millions of years from now, will archaeologists of another species, another world, speculate about us in the same way? They might ask, was there once a people here who mastered strange forces, forces we are only now feeling the edge of? Where are their ruins? Where are their stories? This thought experiment is not about them, but about us. It asks not only whether someone came before, but whether someone will come after. Settling into the drift. Each of these dreams, resonant city, atomic library, quantum garden, silent society, may sound fantastical. And perhaps they are. Yet, they ask us to loosen the frame of possibility, to see that civilizations might leave traces not in ways we expect, but in ways invisible to our methods of looking. Not all evidence is stone-carved against weather. Sometimes it is subtle, delicate, like breath on a window, seen only in the right light, easily erased. So as you lie here drifting, let yourself inhabit these worlds. Walk softly in the city of resonance, hearing the hums of its stone. Hold a crystalline tablet from the library of atoms, feeling it vibrate with invisible words. Sit beneath the flowering tree of the quantum garden. Let each thought dissolve, one into the next, in rhythms gentle as rolling waves. Do they exist? Perhaps not. Almost certainly not. But as possibilities, they enrich the silence. They teach us to stretch imagination wide enough to hold both wonder and the absence of proof. They help us remember that knowledge and mystery are not opposites, but partners in a long, slow dance. And just like particles themselves, dancing between states both known and hidden, Perhaps civilizations too leave both presence and absence as their legacy. In the end, it may not matter whether these societies ever walk the earth. What matters is the act of wondering. Wonder is the bridge between waking thought and the soft silence of sleep. And as this chapter closes, let it carry you on that bridge, gently, into deeper calm. If, even just for a moment, we allow ourselves to believe the possibility that somewhere in Earth's past, tucked into the folds of time, there was a civilization that understood truths beneath the visible world. What follows from that? What does it mean, not only to history, but to the way we feel about who we are? One implication is humility. We so easily imagine ourselves as the peak, the summit of progress, the lone intelligence reaching into the stars. Yet if another culture once walked here before us, exploring even the mysteries of the quantum, then our place is less a pinnacle and more a plateau, one rise among many waves. Like seashells scattered across a long shoreline, we would be one among countless forms the Earth has tried, each shining briefly before time carried it away. This idea, far from diminishing us, might comfort. For if civilizations are impermanent, then perhaps impermanence is not failure, it is normal. Just as flowers bloom and wither, just as rivers carve valleys and then dry, so too might societies unfold, blossom with knowledge, and then return to silence. In this pattern, our transience feels less tragic and more natural, part of Earth's steady breathing. Another implication is wonder itself. Imagine what knowledge might mean if it is rediscovered more than once. If, over millions of years, different thinkers, different beings, all uncovered the same strange principles of superposition, of entanglement, of uncertainty. Physics would then become not just the achievement of one people in one century, but a universal melody, the same song heard by different civilizations across time. Could we, then, be inheritors not only of our own discoveries, but of echoes long forgotten? Could our scientists, when they map probability fields or align lasers, be placing their hands on the same hidden patterns once recognized in another age? It gives to discovery a sense of communion, a dialogue across epochs, like voices harmonizing through the corridors of deep time. A further implication lies in how we think about the future. If others came before us, perhaps soaring in brilliance, then vanishing, what prevents the same from happening to us? Our technologies, however advanced, are still fragile. Our societies, however interconnected, are still subject to collapse. This perspective softens arrogance. It teaches us to tread gently, to see our scientific triumphs not as eternal trophies, but as brief sparks requiring care to keep alive. And here is a subtler wonder. If the universe contains rules waiting to be found again and again, perhaps civilizations anywhere, on Earth, or orbiting other stars, will discover similar truths. The foundations of reality are not human, but cosmic. Quantum physics, relativity, thermodynamics, they belong not to us, but to existence itself. We simply borrow them for a while. So, in the dim hours of night, this possibility reshapes identity. Humanity is not the first or the only. We are fellow travelers on a path that may have been walked many times before, leaving only whispers behind. Scientists sometimes describe civilizations as a cosmic phase transition. They spark, transform, shine briefly, then rest again in quiet matter. If so, then Earth may host such transitions more than once. Perhaps we are but the latest bloom in a long garden that the planet tends patiently in cycles beyond our grasp. This reflection can inspire tenderness. For if we are not alone on the arc of time, then we are companions, even with civilizations we'll never meet. Our place in history is not lonely but woven, like a single thread in a broader tapestry. Even if the evidence is gone, the possibility itself grants us a sense of kinship, a belonging not only to the present but to the eternal experiment of life and thought. So as you settle deeper into your pillow, let these implications rest softly in your mind. Feel the humility of impermanence, the wonder of rediscovery, the tenderness of shared existence across time. Let them be not heavy weights, but quiet music, a melody of possibility to drift off into. The question remains unanswered, as it must. But in the glow of wonder, perhaps the answer is less important than the act of asking itself. At this point in our wandering journey, the question itself begins to dissolve, not because it has been answered, but because it has expanded. What began as a simple curiosity, could a lost civilization have mastered quantum physics, has unfolded not into proof, nor even likelihood, but into meaning. Meaning measured not in artifacts, but in perspective. For what this long night speculation offers us, more than anything, is humility. Civilizations, no matter how luminous, may not last forever. Knowledge may flare, then fade. Entire worlds of thought may rise with brilliance and slip back into silence, as easily as a dream forgotten when morning arrives. And perhaps, that is the natural rhythm. Perhaps nothing is meant to be permanent. This realization does not need to bring despair. Instead, it can bring gentleness. To know that everything, mountains, rivers, languages, empires, even stars, has its time, its flowering, and its withering, is to recognize that we too are a part of this cycle. The brevity of life, and the brevity of civilizations, does not diminish them. It makes them precious. Each moment of curiosity, each spark of insight, shines brighter because it may not come again. And maybe that is the deeper answer to the question. Whether or not there was ever such a quantum-wise civilization before us, the possibility itself teaches us something valuable. That what we hold now, our science, our art, our fragile achievements, is not guaranteed. They are gifts balanced lightly in our hands. To protect them is not merely to advance, but to care tenderly for what we have been given. There is also something comforting in the thought of repetition. Picture again the ocean waves on a calm beach, one rolling in and fading, then another, and another, endless. Civilizations may be like waves, each carrying its own music, its own discoveries, some rising higher, some fading quickly, but all entering the same sea of Earth's memory. Perhaps waves before us once glimpsed truths that we too now glimpse. Perhaps others, long after us, will glimpse them again. Discovery, then, is not a conquest, but a chorus. Philosophically, this changes the way we view ourselves. We are not the summit of history, but a moment within it, not the first, and not the last. There is beauty in belonging to a longer story, to cycles we cannot see the end of. That awareness humbles us, but it also connects us, to each other, to the earth, and even to what might have come before, or what might yet come after. So as you rest here now, lying within your own brief life, held by the arms of a fleeting civilization on a vast and ancient planet, allow that perspective to soften you. You do not have to solve the mystery tonight. You do not have to hold on to it. Simply let the thought become like the tide, flowing in with wonder, flowing out with peace. The question itself, unanswered, becomes a kind of lullaby. And so, we have wandered far tonight, through the immense calendar of deep time, where humans appear only in the final breath of December, through the shimmering landscapes of quantum possibility, where particles behave like dreamers caught between worlds, through speculation and counterargument, imagination and humility. And yet, at the end of this long arc, we are back here, just you, resting in the quiet of night. Perhaps there was no forgotten civilization with physics in its hands. Perhaps the Earth has carried only one such wave of discovery, our own. Or perhaps there were others, rising and vanishing, leaving only silence as their legacy. The truth may never be certain, but maybe certainty is not required. Perhaps the question itself is enough, because in wondering, we slow down. In wondering, we see our moment not as guaranteed, but as luminous and fragile. In wondering, we step out of the hurry of today and bow softly to the immensity of time, recognizing both our smallness and our beauty. So, let the question fade now, like a candle guttering down to its last glow. Let go of the need to answer, as you let go of the day's weight. Feel the rhythm of your breath, steady like the pulse of oceans. Feel your body softening, like sand settling after a wave has passed. One civilization, or many, one truth, or countless. In the end, all rivers return to the sea, all thoughts return to silence. And in this silence, sleep waits for you, patient, gentle, inevitable. Close your eyes, if they are not already closed. Drift, the mystery will keep itself till morning. For now, rest.